The setting sun cast long shadows across the dusty trail as Willow Morgan clutched her swollen belly, pain searing through her body like lightning. She had been traveling for days, desperate to reach Sioux Falls before her baby arrived, but fate had other plans. With a final, desperate gasp, she collapsed onto the hard-packed earth of the Dakota Territory, the world spinning around her as consciousness slipped away. It was 1878, and the Dakota Territory was as unforgiving as it was beautiful. Willow had been traveling alone since leaving Minnesota 3 weeks earlier. Her husband Thomas, buried 6 months ago after a mining accident, left her a widow with a child on the way. The journey had been arduous, each day more difficult than the last as her pregnancy advanced, but she had pressed on with stubborn determination. There was nothing left for her in Minnesota, only memories of the life she had lost. Her cousin in Sioux Falls had written offering her a home, a chance to start again, and Willow had seized it with both hands. Isaac Reynolds saw the woman fall from nearly a quarter-mile away. He had been driving cattle across his land when movement on the horizon caught his eye. Even at that distance, he could tell something was wrong. Spurring his chestnut stallion Monarch forward, Isaac covered the ground between them in moments, dust kicking up behind them as they raced toward the prone figure on the trail. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" Isaac dismounted in one fluid motion, kneeling beside the unconscious woman. Her face was pale beneath a light dusting of trail dust, her chestnut hair escaping from a once neat bun. The swell of her pregnancy was unmistakable beneath her travel-worn dress. Gently, he touched her wrist, relief washing through him as he felt a pulse, rapid but strong. Willow's eyelids fluttered, the world coming back into focus in bits and pieces. A man's face hovered above her, concern etched into features that might have been handsome if they weren't creased with worry. Blue eyes, the color of a summer sky, stared down at her. She tried to speak, but her parched lips and tongue refused to cooperate. "Easy now," the stranger said, his voice low and soothing as he supported her head and held a canteen to her lips. Small sips. The water was cool and sweet, reviving her enough to whisper, "My baby." Understanding dawned immediately on Isaac's face. "How far along are you, madam?" 8 months, I think. The pain started this morning, but I thought. Willow grimaced as another contraction seized her. "I thought I could make it to Sioux Falls." Isaac glanced around, assessing their situation with quick, practiced eyes. They were at least 10 miles from his ranch and probably twice that to Sioux Falls. The sun was setting, and the temperature would drop soon. The woman was in no condition to walk, and riding double on Monarch would be too jarring for someone in her condition. "Madam, my name is Isaac Reynolds. I've got a ranch about 10 miles southwest of here. I'm going to help you, but you need to ride and I'll walk alongside. Can you stay on a horse if I help you up?" Willow nodded weakly, desperate enough to trust this stranger with her life and that of her unborn child. "I'm Willow Morgan." "Mrs. Morgan, it's a pleasure, though I wish we'd met under better circumstances." Isaac managed a small smile as he helped her to sit up, supporting her back with a strong arm. "Rest here a moment while I get Monarch ready." Isaac quickly adjusted his saddle, making it as comfortable as possible for a pregnant woman. He emptied his saddlebags of everything but essentials, tying the rest into a bundle he could carry. Then he led Monarch back to where Willow sat, her face contorted with another contraction. "They're coming faster," she gasped, fear evident in her voice. "We need to get you to shelter," Isaac replied, trying to keep his own concern from showing. "Can you stand with help?" With Isaac's support, Willow struggled to her feet. The world tilted alarmingly, and she leaned heavily against him, embarrassed by her weakness but too exhausted to pretend otherwise. "I'm going to lift you now." Isaac warned before gently hoisting her onto Monarch's back. The horse stood steady, as if sensing the precious cargo he now carried. Isaac arranged Willow's skirts modestly around her legs, then placed the reins in her hands. "Hold these lightly. Monarch's well-trained, he'll follow my lead. Just focus on staying in the saddle." "Thank you," Willow whispered, overwhelmed by this stranger's kindness. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Isaac's expression darkened momentarily. "Let's not think about that. We need to move while there's still light." As they set off, Isaac walked steadily beside the horse, one hand on the bridle, the other occasionally reaching up to steady Willow when she swayed. The going was slow, each step measured to avoid jostling the laboring woman more than necessary. The sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples that gradually gave way to the deep blue of twilight. "You said you were heading to Sioux Falls?" Isaac asked, trying to keep Willow talking and alert. "Yes. My cousin Martha lives there with her husband. They offered me a place after Thomas." Her voice broke. "After my husband died in January." Isaac glanced up at her, sympathy in his eyes. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Morgan." "Thank you." Willow bit her lip as another contraction seized her, this one lasting longer than before. When it passed, she continued, determined to focus on something other than the pain. "Thomas was a miner. The shaft collapsed. They said it was quick, that he didn't suffer, but I don't know if that's true or if they just wanted to comfort me." "Sometimes a kind lie is better than a cruel truth," Isaac replied softly. "Especially when the truth can't change anything." They fell silent for a while, the only sounds the steady rhythm of Monarch's hooves and Isaac's boots on the packed earth. The first stars appeared in the darkening sky, bright pinpricks against the vastness of the prairie night. "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Reynolds," Willow said eventually, needing distraction from the increasing frequency and intensity of her contractions. "Do you have family nearby?" Isaac shook his head. "Just me at the ranch. I came west after the war fought for the Union. Didn't have much to go back to in Pennsylvania, so I decided to try my luck out here. Worked cattle drives for a few years, saved every penny, then bought my spread 5 years ago." "You've done well, then?" Willow asked, genuinely interested despite her discomfort. "Well enough. The land's good for cattle, and I've got a decent herd now. Built a proper house last year, 2 stories, with glass windows and everything." There was pride in his voice, the satisfaction of a man who had built something with his own hands. Another contraction hit Willow, stronger than before, pulling a cry from her lips before she could stifle it. Isaac immediately stopped, reaching up to steady her as she doubled over in the saddle. "Mrs. Morgan, how are you holding up?" "I don't," she gasped for breath. "I don't think I can make it all the way to your ranch. The baby's coming faster than I expected." Isaac scanned their surroundings, his mind racing. They had covered perhaps 3 miles, which meant they were still far from his property, but he knew this land well. "There's a line shack about a mile ahead. It's basic, but it's shelter. We can make it there." Willow nodded, too focused on breathing through the next contraction to speak. Isaac quickened their pace slightly, his eyes constantly moving between the trail ahead and the woman swaying on his horse. The line shack appeared just as Willow feared she could go no further. It was a simple structure, little more than a one-room cabin built for cowboys to use during roundups and bad weather, but to Willow, it looked like a palace. Isaac helped her down from Monarch, supporting her weight as her legs threatened to buckle beneath her. The interior of the shack was sparse but clean. A narrow bed stood against one wall, a small table and 2 chairs in the center of the room, and a stone fireplace occupied the far wall. Isaac quickly lit a lantern hanging from a beam, then guided Willow to the bed. Rest here while I take care of Monarch and get a fire going. It gets cold at night, even in June." Willow sank onto the bed with a grateful sigh, fighting another contraction as Isaac disappeared outside. By the time he returned, she had removed her bonnet and loosened her hair, the chestnut waves falling around her shoulders. Isaac paused in the doorway, struck by how beautiful she was despite her exhaustion and pain. Shaking himself from his momentary distraction, Isaac busied himself building a fire in the fireplace. Soon, a cheerful blaze cast warmth and flickering light throughout the small cabin. He filled a pot with water from his canteen and set it near the fire to heat, then turned to assess the situation. "Mrs. Morgan, I'm no doctor, but I've helped birth calves and foals." "Is there," he faltered, suddenly acutely aware of the impropriety of their situation. "Is there anything I can do to help you now?" Willow met his gaze, fear and determination warring in her eyes. "I've never had a child before, Mr. Reynolds. I don't know what to expect, but I'm fairly certain I'll need help." Another contraction seized her, and she gripped the edge of the bed until her knuckles turned white. "I think the baby is coming soon." Isaac nodded, his expression serious. "I'll do everything I can. I have clean cloths in my saddlebags, and there should be some extra blankets in that trunk over there." As the night deepened, Willow's labor progressed rapidly. Isaac moved with quiet efficiency, preparing the bed as best he could, heating water and keeping the fire stoked. When Willow's water broke, soaking the bedding, he helped her change positions without embarrassment, his manner professional and respectful. Hours passed, marked by Willow's increasingly frequent cries of pain. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling around the corners of the small cabin and rattling the shutters. Inside, the atmosphere was tense with anticipation and fear. "Mr. Reynolds," Willow gasped during a brief respite between contractions. "If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you," Isaac interrupted firmly. "You're doing wonderfully, Mrs. Morgan. You're the strongest woman I've ever met." A weak smile flickered across Willow's face. "Nonetheless, if something happens, please take my baby to my cousin in Sioux Falls. Her name is Martha Wilson. She lives on Cedar Street near the church." "I'll remember," Isaac promised, though he had no intention of letting anything happen to this remarkable woman. "But you'll be delivering this baby yourself, and then we'll get you both to Sioux Falls safe and sound." Willow's reply was cut short by another contraction, stronger than any before. "I need to push," she cried, instinct taking over. Isaac positioned himself at the foot of the bed, his sleeves rolled up and his hands as clean as he could make them. "Then push, Mrs. Morgan. I'm right here." The next hour was a blur of pain and effort for Willow and focused concentration for Isaac. He talked her through each contraction, his voice steady and encouraging. When the baby's head finally appeared, Isaac felt a surge of relief and excitement. "One more push, Willow," he urged, using her first name without thinking. "One more good push and your baby will be here." With a final, tremendous effort, Willow pushed, and suddenly Isaac was holding a tiny, slippery infant in his hands. For a heart-stopping moment, the baby was silent, then a lusty cry filled the cabin. "It's a boy," Isaac announced, his voice thick with emotion. "A healthy baby boy." Tears streamed down Willow's face as Isaac quickly cleaned the infant, tied off the umbilical cord with a piece of clean string, and wrapped the baby in a soft blanket before placing him in his mother's arms. "Hello, little one," Willow whispered, studying her son's tiny features with wonder. "Hello, Thomas." She looked up at Isaac, her eyes shining with gratitude and exhaustion. "Thank you. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Isaac shook his head, unexpectedly moved by the sight of mother and child. "No thanks necessary, Mrs. Morgan." I'm just glad I was there on the trail when you needed help." After helping Willow deliver the afterbirth and making her as comfortable as possible, Isaac stepped outside to give her some privacy. The night was clear and cool, the stars brilliant overhead. He took a deep breath, trying to process the extraordinary events of the evening. He had set out that morning to check on a section of fence and had returned having helped deliver a baby. Life was strange sometimes. Inside the cabin, Willow marveled at her son's perfection: 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, a shock of dark hair like his father's, and eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom of the ages. Despite her exhaustion, she couldn't stop staring at him, committing every detail to memory. When Isaac returned, he had Willow's satchel from Monarch's back. "I thought you might have some things for the baby in here," he explained, setting it beside the bed. "Thank you." Willow looked up at him, really seeing him clearly for the first time since they'd met. He was taller than average, with broad shoulders and strong hands that had so gently guided her son into the world. His face was weathered from years in the sun, with laugh lines around his eyes and mouth that spoke of a good humor. His brown hair was a bit too long, curling at the nape of his neck, and his beard was neatly trimmed. "You've been so kind, Mr. Reynolds. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me." "Please call me Isaac," he said, sitting on one of the chairs he'd pulled near the bed. "After what we've been through, formality seems a bit ridiculous." Willow smiled, adjusting little Thomas in her arms. "Isaac, then, and I'm Willow, not Mrs. Morgan." They talked quietly as the night deepened, Isaac explaining that they would need to stay at the line shack for at least a day or two before Willow would be strong enough to travel. He would ride to his ranch in the morning to get supplies and send word to her cousin in Sioux Falls that she was safe but delayed. "I hate to be such a burden," Willow said, stifling a yawn. "You're not a burden," Isaac assured her. "Now, you should sleep while the little one does. I'll keep the fire going." Despite her protests, Isaac refused to take the bed, insisting he was perfectly comfortable in the chair. Willow was too exhausted to argue for long. With her son nestled safely beside her, she drifted into a deep, healing sleep. The dawn light filtering through the cabin's single window woke Isaac. For a moment, he was disoriented, unused to waking anywhere but his own bedroom. Then he heard the soft sounds of breathing from the bed and remembered everything. Willow and her newborn son were still sleeping peacefully, her chestnut hair spread across the pillow, one protective arm curved around the baby. Moving quietly, Isaac rekindled the fire and heated water for coffee. The domestic task felt strange yet pleasant in the presence of mother and child. Usually, he performed his morning routine alone, with only the sounds of his own movements for company. Willow stirred as the aroma of coffee filled the small space. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice still thick with sleep. "Morning," Isaac replied, keeping his voice low. "How are you feeling? Sore? Tired?" A smile bloomed on her face as she gazed at her sleeping son. "Happier than I've been in a very long time." Isaac brought her a cup of coffee, which she accepted gratefully. "I need to ride to my ranch for supplies." "Will you be all right here alone for a few hours?" Willow nodded. "We'll be fine. Little Thomas and I will just rest." Isaac hesitated, reluctant to leave them but knowing they needed proper food and fresh water. "I'll leave my pistol with you just in case. Do you know how to use it?" "My father taught me," Willow confirmed, "but I'm sure we won't need it." Still, Isaac placed the weapon within easy reach before preparing to depart. "I'll be back as soon as I can. There's coffee in the pot and a bit of jerky in my saddlebags if you get hungry." Willow watched him go, a strange emptiness settling in her chest as the door closed behind him. For someone who had been a complete stranger just yesterday, Isaac Reynolds had become remarkably important very quickly. The hours of Isaac's absence gave Willow time to properly care for Thomas and herself. She washed as best she could with the limited water, changed into her last clean dress from her satchel, and practiced nursing her hungry son. By the time she heard hoofbeats approaching, she was sitting up in bed, feeling much more human than she had that morning. Isaac returned with saddlebags full of provisions, fresh bread and dried meat, a jar of preserved peaches, clean linens, and a small bundle of baby clothes that he somewhat sheepishly explained had belonged to his foreman's youngest. "Jim's wife said you're welcome to them," he explained, setting the bundle on the bed. "She also sent along some herbs for tea that she swears helps new mothers recover their strength." Willow was touched by the thoughtfulness of people who didn't even know her. "Please thank them for me. These will be perfect for Thomas." Isaac busied himself preparing a more substantial meal than jerky, while Willow dressed Thomas in his new clothes. The domestic scene felt surprisingly natural, as if they had known each other for years instead of hours. "I sent a rider to Sioux Falls with a message for your cousin," Isaac informed her as they ate. "Explained that you're safe but need a few days to recover before traveling. Asked her to come to my ranch when you're strong enough to move there, rather than making you journey all the way to town." Willow's heart warmed at his consideration. "That's very kind, but I've imposed on you enough. Perhaps I could—" "It's no imposition," Isaac interrupted firmly. "My house is much more comfortable than this shack, and you'll need proper rest before continuing to Sioux Falls." His expression softened. "Besides, my housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, would never forgive me if I didn't offer a new mother the best hospitality we can provide." Over the next 2 days, they fell into an easy routine. Isaac tended to Monarch, kept the fire stoked, and prepared simple but nourishing meals. Willow cared for Thomas and regained her strength, surprised by how rapidly she was recovering. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their lives before they met. Willow spoke of her childhood in Ohio, her marriage to Thomas Morgan, and their dreams of building a life together before the mining accident shattered everything. Isaac told her about fighting at Gettysburg, losing his parents to influenza while he was at war, and his journey west to start anew. "I never intended to stay in Dakota Territory," he admitted as they sat by the fire on their second evening. Thomas was sleeping peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. "I was heading for California, but when I saw this land," Isaac's eyes took on a distant look. "There was something about it that felt like home." "I understand," Willow replied softly. "Some places just claim you, don't they? I felt that way about Minnesota when Thomas and I first arrived. After he died, though." She trailed off, lost in memories. "It wasn't home anymore," Isaac finished for her. Willow nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Exactly." Their conversations ranged from serious topics like faith and loss to lighter matters, favorite books. Willow loved Dickens, while Isaac preferred Cooper's frontier tales, childhood adventures, and future hopes. Willow found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn out of her grief by Isaac's quiet humor and gentle presence. For his part, Isaac discovered depths to Willow that surprised and intrigued him. She was not just beautiful but intelligent and thoughtful, with opinions on everything from politics to poetry. Her strength in the face of personal tragedy impressed him, as did her obvious devotion to her newborn son. On the morning of the third day, Isaac declared Willow strong enough to travel to his ranch. "It's only about 7 miles from here. We'll take it slow, and you can ride Monarch while I walk beside you, just like before." "I can't ask you to walk that distance again," Willow protested. "You're not asking. I'm offering," Isaac replied with a smile. Besides, I walk my property every day. 7 miles is nothing." They set out mid-morning with Thomas securely bundled and cradled in Willow's arms. The June day was perfect warm sunshine, a gentle breeze, and prairie flowers blooming in vibrant patches across the landscape. Isaac pointed out landmarks as they traveled, telling stories about the land and his experiences taming it. "That ridge there is the northern boundary of my property," he explained as they crested a small hill. "And there," he pointed to a plume of smoke rising in the distance, "that's the ranch house." As they drew closer, Willow could make out a substantial 2-story home built of timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front and one side. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, a large barn, what appeared to be a bunkhouse, and various smaller structures. A corral held several horses, and beyond that, Willow could see cattle grazing on the lush grass. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely, impressed by what Isaac had built for himself. "Thank you." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. "It's not fancy, but it's mine." A plump, gray-haired woman emerged from the house as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. Behind her, a tall man with a weathered face stepped onto the porch, his expression curious. "Mrs. Abernathy," Isaac called out, "I've brought guests." The housekeeper hurried down the steps, her face alight with interest as she took in the sight of Willow on Monarch with a baby in her arms. "So this is the young lady Jim told me about," she said, her voice warm with welcome. "And the little one, too. Oh, bring them inside, Isaac. I've got the blue room all ready, and there's stew on the stove." Isaac helped Willow dismount, supporting her with a gentle hand at her waist. She was steadier now than she had been on the trail, but still grateful for his assistance. "Mrs. Abernathy, this is Mrs. Willow Morgan and her son Thomas," Isaac introduced. "Willow, this is Mrs. Abernathy, who keeps me fed and makes sure I don't live like a complete savage. And that's Jim Parker, my foreman." "Welcome to the Reynolds Ranch, Mrs. Morgan," Jim said with a polite nod. "My Sarah sends her regards and hopes the baby clothes fit the little one." "They're perfect," Willow assured him. "Please thank your wife for her kindness." Mrs. Abernathy ushered them into the house, clucking like a mother hen over Willow's pale complexion and Thomas's tiny size. The interior of Isaac's home was surprisingly elegant for a bachelor's residence: polished wooden floors, comfortable furniture, and shelves lined with books. A large fireplace dominated the main room, and windows let in ample light. "The blue room is just up these stairs," Mrs. Abernathy explained, leading the way. "It has the best view of the sunrise, and I put a cradle in there for the baby. Jim brought it over from their place. Their youngest outgrew it last year." The room was indeed blue, with pale walls and darker blue curtains framing large windows. A 4-poster bed stood against one wall, made up with crisp white linens and a colorful quilt. The promised cradle sat nearby, lined with soft blankets. "It's lovely," Willow said, overwhelmed by the luxury after days in the lined shack. "Thank you so much for your hospitality." "Nonsense, dear. It's our pleasure to have a woman in the house for a change," Mrs. Abernathy replied with a pointed look at Isaac, who had followed them upstairs. "This one works too hard and talks too little. Some female company will do him good." "Mrs. Abernathy," Isaac protested, a hint of color appearing on his cheeks. The housekeeper waved a dismissive hand. "Go see to your horse, Isaac. I'll help Mrs. Morgan get settled." Despite his embarrassment, Isaac looked relieved to escape the domestic scene. "I'll be back for supper," he promised before retreating downstairs. Left alone with Mrs. Abernathy, Willow found herself peppered with questions about her journey, her baby, and her plans for the future. The older woman's manner was kind but forthright, her obvious affection for Isaac evident in her thinly veiled attempts to discover Willow's opinion of her employer. "He's a good man," Mrs. Abernathy declared as she helped Willow unpack the meager contents of her satchel. "Too good to be out here all alone, if you ask me. Needs a wife and family, but he's too stubborn to go looking." "He's been very kind to me," Willow agreed cautiously, unwilling to encourage what seemed to be matchmaking attempts. "I don't know what would have happened if he hadn't found me on the trail." "Providence, that's what that was," Mrs. Abernathy nodded firmly. "Now you rest a bit before supper. I'll come fetch you when it's ready." Left alone with her sleeping son, Willow sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the smooth quilt. After months of grief and weeks of difficult travel, she suddenly found herself in a beautiful home, surrounded by kind people who seemed genuinely pleased to have her there. It was almost too much to process. And then there was Isaac. In just 3 days, he had become important to her in a way she hadn't thought possible after losing Thomas. His quiet strength, his gentle hands, the way he looked at her son with such wonder, all of it touched something in her that she'd thought died with her husband. The thought sent a spike of guilt through her. Thomas had been dead only 6 months. It seemed disloyal to already be feeling whatever this was, for another man. Willow pushed the confusing emotions aside, focusing instead on practical matters. She would rest here until her cousin could come from Sioux Falls, then continue with her original plan. Isaac Reynolds would become a fond memory, a story to tell Thomas when he was older about the kind cowboy who had helped bring him into the world. Decided, Willow lay down beside her son, intending to rest briefly before supper. Instead, she fell into a deep sleep, the exhaustion of the past days finally catching up with her. Downstairs, Isaac was having a similar internal debate as he tended to Monarch in the barn. Willow Morgan was unlike any woman he had ever met. Her strength, her intelligence, and yes, her beauty, had captured his attention from the moment he found her on the trail. Helping deliver her son had created a bond between them that felt both sacred and profound. But she was a recent widow, still grieving her husband. She had plans to live with her cousin in Sioux Falls, to build a new life for herself and her son. The last thing she needed was a lonely rancher developing feelings for her. "You're being ridiculous," Isaac muttered to himself as he brushed Monarch's coat. "You've known her for 3 days. "Talking to yourself now," Jim's voice came from the barn door, amusement evident in his tone. Isaac glanced up, embarrassed to be caught. "Just thinking out loud." Jim leaned against the doorframe, studying his friend and employer. "She's pretty, you're Mrs. Morgan." "She's not my anything," Isaac replied too quickly. "She's a widow heading to Sioux Falls who happened to need help. Hum. Jim's skeptical expression said he wasn't convinced, and that's why you've been brushing the same spot on that horse for 5 minutes. Isaac looked down to find he had indeed been absently grooming the same section of Monarch's flank. With a sigh, he set the brush aside. "It's complicated. Always is with women," Jim agreed sagely, "but sometimes complications are worth it." He straightened, turning to leave. "Just something to think about." Alone again, Isaac did think about it. He thought about Willow's smile when she looked at her son, about the way her eyes lit up when she talked about books she loved, about how right it had felt to sit across from her at the small table in the lined shack, sharing coffee and conversation as the dawn light filled the room. He thought about the emptiness of his house despite its size and comforts, and about how different it felt with Willow and Thomas under its roof. For the first time since building it, the house felt like it might become a home. But he also thought about the pain of loss, something he understood too well from his own experiences. Willow needed time to heal, to find her footing as a mother, to build the life she had planned with her cousin in Sioux Falls. One day at a time, Isaac decided aloud. He would be a good host, a friend if she wanted one, and nothing more unless she indicated otherwise. Resolved, he finished tending to Monarch and headed to the house for supper, unaware that his housekeeper had already formed plans of her own regarding their guests. Mrs. Abernathy had outdone herself with the evening meal: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from her kitchen garden, with apple pie for dessert. Willow, refreshed from her nap and wearing a clean dress borrowed from Sarah Parker, joined them at the large dining table, Thomas sleeping peacefully in her arms. "You didn't need to go to such trouble," she protested when she saw the spread. "Nonsense," Mrs. Abernathy replied, beaming. "It's not every day we have a new mother to feed. You need your strength, dear." The meal was delicious, the conversation easy and pleasant. Jim shared amusing stories about life on the ranch, while Mrs. Abernathy kept everyone's plates full and interjected with her own observations. Isaac was quieter, but his eyes frequently strayed to Willow, tracking her expressions as she laughed at Jim's tales. After dinner, when Jim had returned to his family and Mrs. Abernathy was busy in the kitchen, Isaac and Willow sat on the porch, enjoying the cool evening air. Thomas was awake now, his dark eyes alert as he studied his surroundings with the intense focus of newborns everywhere. "He has your eyes," Isaac observed, watching the baby's face. "And his father's hair," Willow added, brushing a finger over Thomas's dark curls. "I hope he has Thomas's kindness too." "I think he's likely to have yours as well," Isaac replied. "From what you've told me, you both sound like good people." Willow smiled, touched by the compliment. "We had our moments. No marriage is perfect." She looked out over the ranch, bathed in the golden light of sunset. "This really is beautiful land, Isaac. You've built something wonderful here." "Thank you." He followed her gaze, seeing his property through her eyes. "It's been a lot of work, but worth it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Thomas began to fuss, and Willow rocked him gently, humming a lullaby under her breath. "I should take him inside," she said after a moment. "Thank you for a lovely evening, Isaac." "It was my pleasure," he replied, standing to open the door for her. "Sleep well, Willow." Their eyes met briefly as she passed him, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of the unusual circumstances that had brought them together, and the equally unusual connection that seemed to be forming. That night, as Willow nursed Thomas in the quiet of her room, she found herself thinking about Isaac, about his kindness, his strength, and the gentle way he looked at her son. It was too soon, she knew, to be thinking this way about another man. And yet, she couldn't deny the warm feeling that spread through her whenever Isaac was near. "What do you think, little one?" she whispered to her son. "Is it wrong to feel happy when I should still be grieving your father?" Thomas gazed up at her with sleepy eyes, offering no answers but a certain comfort nonetheless. Willow stroked his cheek with a gentle finger. "I loved your father very much. I will always love him, and I will make sure you know all about him as you grow." She paused, her thoughts turning to Isaac again. "But maybe there's room in our hearts for new people too." Across the hall in his own room, Isaac was having similar thoughts. He stood at the window, looking out at his land bathed in moonlight. For years, he had poured his energy into building this ranch, making it successful, creating something lasting. He had been content with his life, proud of what he had accomplished. But now, with Willow and Thomas under his roof, he realized that his home had been missing something vital: the warmth of family, the sound of a woman's laughter, the wonder of a child's presence. He had built a house and a business, but not a life. Not really. "It's too soon," he reminded himself firmly. Willow was still grieving, still adjusting to motherhood, still planning to leave for Sioux Falls. And yet, as he finally turned from the window and prepared for bed, Isaac couldn't help but hope that perhaps, somehow, those plans might change. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Isaac was in the barn discussing the day's work with Jim when they heard the sound of an approaching wagon. Stepping outside, they saw a light buggy coming up the drive, driven by a middle-aged woman with a younger man beside her. That might be Mrs. Morgan's cousin, Jim suggested. Looks like they got your message. Isaac nodded, brushing hay from his shirt as he walked to meet the visitors. The woman reined in the horses and peered down at him with obvious curiosity. "Are you Mr. Reynolds?" she asked. "Yes, madam, Isaac Reynolds." He touched the brim of his hat politely. "You must be Mrs. Wilson." "Martha Wilson, yes, and this is my husband, Edward." She gestured to the man beside her, who nodded a greeting. "We came as soon as we got your message. Is Willow all right? The baby too?" "They're both doing well," Isaac assured her. "Mrs. Morgan is resting in the house. If you'll follow me." He led the Wilsons to the porch, where Mrs. Abernathy had appeared, alerted by the sound of the buggy. After quick introductions, she hurried inside to fetch Willow while Isaac invited the Wilsons to sit. "We can't thank you enough for helping Willow," Martha said earnestly. "When we heard she'd collapsed on the trail," she shuddered. "It doesn't bear thinking about what might have happened if you hadn't found her." "I was just in the right place at the right time," Isaac demurred. "Anyone would have done the same." Edward Wilson raised an eyebrow. "Given her a horse and walked 10 miles, helped deliver her baby." "I'm not so sure about that, Mr. Reynolds." Before Isaac could respond, the door opened, and Willow emerged with Thomas in her arms and Mrs. Abernathy hovering protectively behind her. Martha immediately rose and rushed to embrace her cousin, careful of the baby between them. "Willow." "Oh, we were so worried when you didn't arrive as scheduled, and then to get Mr. Reynolds's message." Martha pulled back to look at her cousin's face. "Are you truly all right?" "I'm fine, Martha. Better than fine." Willow's smile was genuine as she introduced her son. "This is Thomas, born 3 days ago with Mr. Reynolds's help." Martha cooed over the baby while Edward shook Isaac's hand with genuine gratitude. "We're in your debt, sir." "Not at all," Isaac replied, his eyes straying to Willow. She looked different today, more vibrant, with color in her cheeks and a quiet confidence as she showed her son to her relatives. The blue dress she wore, borrowed from Sarah Parker, suited her coloring perfectly, and she had styled her hair in a simple but becoming arrangement. Martha was already making plans. "We should get you back to Sioux Falls as soon as possible. I've made up the spare room for you and the baby, and several of the church ladies have gathered baby things, clothes and blankets and such. Everyone's so excited to meet you both." Willow's smile faltered almost imperceptibly. "That's very kind, but I'm not sure I'm strong enough for the journey yet. It's quite a distance to town." "It's about 20 miles, Edward confirmed. "A long ride for a new mother. Perhaps Mrs. Morgan could stay here a few more days," Isaac suggested, trying to keep his tone neutral despite the leap of hope in his chest. "Until she's fully recovered." Martha looked uncertain, glancing between her cousin and their host. "Well, I suppose if Willow feels she needs more rest." "I do," Willow said quickly. "And everyone has been so kind here. Mrs. Abernathy has been looking after us wonderfully." "It's no trouble at all," the housekeeper added. "In fact, it's a pleasure having a young mother and baby in the house. Brightens the place up." After some discussion, it was decided that Willow and Thomas would remain at the Reynolds ranch for another week, giving Willow time to regain her strength before making the journey to Sioux Falls. The Wilsons would return the following Sunday to bring them to town. "I hope we're not imposing," Willow said to Isaac after her cousins had departed. promising to return with more baby supplies in a few days. "Not at all," Isaac assured her, surprising himself with how sincerely he meant it. "It's good to have company. The house can feel too quiet sometimes." They stood on the porch together, watching the Wilsons' buggy disappear down the drive. Thomas was asleep in Willow's arms, his tiny face peaceful in repose. "I've been thinking," Isaac said after a moment. "Would you like to see more of the ranch while you're here?" "When you feel strong enough, of course. We could take a short ride. I have a gentle mare that would be perfect." Willow's face lit up at the suggestion. "I'd like that very much. I've been cooped up for so long, first with the pregnancy and then the journey. It would be wonderful to explore a bit." "Tomorrow, then, if the weather holds." "Tomorrow," Willow agreed with a smile that warmed Isaac more than the summer sun overhead. True to his word, the next day Isaac arranged for a gentle ride around the ranch. Mrs. Abernathy, thrilled by the developing friendship between her employer and their guest, volunteered to watch Thomas for a couple of hours. "He'll be perfectly fine," she assured Willow, who was reluctant to leave her son despite her desire for fresh air and exercise. "I raised 4 of my own, you know, and if he gets hungry, you won't be far." Finally convinced, Willow allowed Isaac to help her onto the mare he had selected for her, a dappled gray named Daisy with a placid temperament and smooth gait. Isaac mounted Monarch, and they set off at a leisurely pace, keeping to level ground and well-maintained trails. The June day was perfect for riding, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of prairie flowers. Isaac pointed out landmarks as they rode, naming the distant mountains and explaining the boundaries of his property. "It's all so vast," Willow marveled, taking in the sweeping vistas. "In Minnesota, the trees close everything in. There's something frightening but exhilarating about being able to see so far." "That's exactly how I felt when I first came west," Isaac agreed, "like I could breathe properly for the first time." They rode to a small rise that offered a panoramic view of the ranch, the house, and outbuildings nestled in a shallow valley, cattle grazing on the lush summer grass, and beyond, the rolling prairie stretching to the horizon. "This is my favorite spot on the property," Isaac confessed as they dismounted to rest the horses. "I come here to think, or just to remind myself how lucky I am to have found this place." Willow walked to the edge of the rise, the breeze catching her hair and loosening strands from her simple updo. "I can see why. It's beautiful." She turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "You've built something remarkable here, Isaac. You should be proud." "I am," he replied, moving to stand beside her. "But lately I've been thinking there's more to life than just building a successful ranch." "Oh," Willow's voice was soft, her eyes searching his face. Having you and Thomas here, Isaac hesitated, unsure how far to go with his confession. "It's made me realize what's been missing." A flush rose in Willow's cheeks, but she didn't look away. "I know what you mean. After Thomas, my husband, died, I thought I'd never feel at home anywhere again, but these past few days." They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Finally, Isaac took a small step back, not wanting to pressure her. "We should head back. You don't want to overdo it on your first ride." Willow nodded, allowing him to help her remount Daisy. As they rode back to the ranch, side by side in comfortable silence, Isaac found himself hoping more fervently than ever that Willow might reconsider her plans to leave. The week passed in a pleasant blur for both of them. Each day, Willow grew stronger, venturing farther on their rides and taking an interest in the workings of the ranch. Isaac taught her about cattle raising, showed her his small orchard of apple trees just starting to bear fruit, and introduced her to the various hands who worked his land. For her part, Willow shared stories of her life before widowhood, her love of teaching. She had been a schoolteacher before her marriage, her dreams of writing children's books someday, and her passion for music. In the evenings, she played the piano in Isaac's parlor, an instrument that had stood mostly silent since he purchased it on a whim in Sioux Falls the previous year. Thomas thrived in the peaceful environment, growing stronger daily and developing what Mrs. Abernathy declared was a definite personality, just like his mother. The baby became a favorite with everyone on the ranch, from Mrs. Abernathy, who doted on him shamelessly, to Jim's 3 children, who visited specifically to see the little cowpoke, as Jim had dubbed him. On the 4th day of Willow's extended stay, Martha Wilson returned with a trunk full of baby clothes, blankets, and other necessities donated by the ladies of her church. She brought news of Sioux Falls as well, describing the house where Willow and Thomas would live and the teaching position that might be available at the town school in the autumn. "It would be perfect for you," Martha enthused as they sorted through the baby things in Willow's room. "Just 3 hours a day teaching the younger children. I've already spoken to Reverend Haynes about it, and he thinks you'd be ideal." "That's very kind," Willow replied, folding a tiny shirt with careful hands. "But Thomas will still be so young." "I'll watch him while you teach, of course," Martha assured her. "It will be no trouble at all. Edward and I are looking forward to having you both with us." Willow smiled, but her enthusiasm didn't quite reach her eyes. The prospect of moving to Sioux Falls, which had seemed so perfect a solution just weeks ago, now filled her with an inexplicable reluctance. Martha, more perceptive than Willow gave her credit for, noticed her cousin's subdued response. "Unless you've had second thoughts," she probed gently. No, Willow said quickly. "It's a wonderful opportunity. I'm just still adjusting to motherhood, I suppose. Everything feels so overwhelming." Martha patted her hand sympathetically. "Of course it does, dear, but you'll have help in town." "And speaking of help," her voice lowered conspiratorially, "Mr. Reynolds seems very attentive." Willow busied herself with the baby clothes, avoiding her cousin's knowing gaze. "He's been very kind to all of us. A true gentleman. MMM." Martha's tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by Willow's casual dismissal. "He's quite handsome, too, in that rugged frontier way, and successful from the looks of this ranch. A woman could do worse." "Martha," Willow protested, a blush spreading across her cheeks. "I only just lost Thomas." Martha's expression softened. "I know, dear, and I'm not suggesting anything improper, but life goes on, Willow. Thomas would have wanted you to be happy." The conversation shifted to other topics, but Martha's words lingered in Willow's mind long after her cousin had departed. Would Thomas have wanted her to find happiness again? She thought he might have. Her late husband had been a generous soul, more concerned with others' well-being than his own. He would have hated to think of her living a half-life of perpetual mourning. And Isaac. There was no denying the connection between them. It had formed rapidly, born of the intense circumstances of their meeting and strengthened by the days that followed. Willow found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, the way his hands moved as he worked, the smile that transformed his serious face when something amused him, the gentle way he held Thomas when Willow needed a break. That evening, unable to sleep despite her physical fatigue, Willow wrapped herself in a shawl and slipped downstairs to the porch. The night was clear, the stars brilliant against the velvet darkness of the sky. She stood at the railing, breathing in the cool air and trying to sort through her tangled emotions. "Couldn't sleep." Isaac's voice came softly from the shadows. Willow started, then relaxed as he stepped into view. "Thomas is actually sleeping soundly for once. I should be taking advantage of it, but my mind won't quiet." "Mine either." Isaac moved to stand beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Sometimes I think the night was made for thinking. They stood in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the distant lowing of cattle and the soft chirping of crickets. Martha mentioned a teaching position in Sioux Falls, Isaac said eventually, his voice carefully neutral. That sounds perfect for you from what you've told me about your previous work. Yes, it does seem ideal. Willow gazed out at the darkened landscape. I've always loved teaching, and Martha and Edward have been so generous with their offer to help with Thomas. You'll be happy there, I think. Sioux Falls is growing quickly. It has good people. Willow turned to look at him, his profile outlined against the starlit sky. I'm sure I will be, she said softly, but I've been very happy here too. Isaac met her gaze, his eyes searching hers in the dim light. You could stay, you know. The words came out before he could stop them, hanging in the air between them. Willow's breath caught. Isaac, I know it's too soon, he continued quickly. I know you're still grieving Thomas, still adjusting to motherhood, and I know we've only known each other a short time. But Willow, he took a half step closer. I can't remember what this place was like before you and your son were in it. It was just a house. Now it feels like it could be a home. Tears pricked at Willow's eyes, unexpected emotion welling up at his heartfelt words. I don't know what to say. This is all so sudden. I'm not asking for promises, Isaac assured her, reaching out to gently take her hand. Just time. Stay a little longer. Let's see where this might lead. Willow looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. In the week since Thomas's birth, she had come to trust this man implicitly. He had seen her at her most vulnerable, had helped bring her son into the world, had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. And beneath the gratitude she felt was something else, something warm and hopeful that had begun to bloom despite her grief. What would this look like? She asked quietly. If I stayed, relief flooded Isaac's features at her question. However you want it to look. You could have the blue room or any other in the house. Mrs. Abernathy already adores both of you and would be thrilled to have help with the household. There's the piano you play so beautifully, books to read, the ranch to explore. He paused, his expression earnest. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, there could be more between us. But only if and when you want that. The offer was generous, thoughtful, and exactly what Willow needed: space to heal, time to consider her future, with no pressure or expectations. Isaac was giving her a choice, something she had felt was lacking since Thomas's death had upended her life. I need to think, she said finally, and to talk to Martha. They've made plans for me and I don't want to seem ungrateful. Of course. Isaac squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. Take all the time you need. They remained on the porch a while longer, the air between them charged with possibility. When Willow finally returned to her room, Thomas was still sleeping peacefully. She stood over his cradle, watching his tiny chest rise and fall with each breath. What should we do, little one? She whispered. Where do we belong? The answer didn't come immediately, but as Willow drifted off to sleep, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for months. Whatever she decided, she was no longer simply reacting to circumstances beyond her control. She was choosing her own path. The next morning, Willow wrote a long letter to her cousin, explaining her feelings and asking for Martha's understanding. Isaac, sensing her need for space to make her decision, kept himself busy with ranch work, though his eyes sought her out whenever they were in the same room. By the time Sunday arrived and the Wilsons returned to take Willow to Sioux Falls, she had made her choice. Standing on the porch with Thomas in her arms, she faced her cousin's concerned expression with calm determination. I'm not coming to town today, Martha, she said gently. I've decided to stay at the ranch a while longer. Martha's eyes widened, darting to Isaac, who stood a respectful distance away. "Willow, are you certain we've prepared everything for you and the baby? I know, and I'm so grateful." Willow reached out to squeeze her cousin's hand. "But I need more time to find my footing as a mother, to decide what kind of life I want to build for Thomas and myself. Isaac has offered us a place here, with no expectations or pressure." Edward Wilson studied Isaac thoughtfully. "And your intentions, Mr. Reynolds?" Isaac met the older man's gaze steadily. "Only to provide Mrs. Morgan and her son with a safe place to heal and grow. Whatever happens beyond that will be her choice entirely." Martha still looked uncertain, but Edward nodded slowly. "That seems fair enough." He turned to Willow. "You know you're welcome in our home anytime if you change your mind." "I know," Willow smiled gratefully, "and we'll visit often. Sioux Falls isn't so far." After extracting promises from both Willow and Isaac to join them for Sunday dinner the following week, the Wilsons departed, leaving an atmosphere of nervous anticipation behind them. "Are you sure about this?" Isaac asked once the buggy was out of sight. "I don't want you to feel pressured in any way." Willow shifted Thomas to her other arm, considering her words carefully. "I'm sure that I'm not ready to close any doors yet. Staying here gives me time and space to heal, to think about what I truly want." She met his gaze directly. "And I'm sure that when I'm with you I feel possibilities opening up that I thought were gone forever." It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was honest. Isaac's expression softened with understanding. "That's more than enough for now," he assured her. And so began a new chapter for both of them. Willow and Thomas settled into life at the Reynolds Ranch, finding a rhythm that accommodated both the baby's needs and the daily workings of the property. Willow took over some of the household management from Mrs. Abernathy, who was delighted to have another woman to talk to and to share her duties. As promised, Isaac gave Willow space and time, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. They continued their daily rides when weather permitted, exploring more of the ranch and the surrounding countryside. In the evenings, they sat on the porch or in the parlor, talking about everything and nothing: books they'd read, places they'd seen, dreams they still harbored. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, their relationship evolved. Casual touches, a hand on an arm, fingers brushing while passing a cup, became more frequent. Conversations deepened, revealing vulnerabilities and hopes that neither had shared with anyone else. Laughter came more easily, the comfort of familiarity blossoming between them. By the time Thomas was a month old, thriving under the collective care of his mother, Isaac, Mrs. Abernathy, and the entire ranch community, Willow found herself thinking of the Reynolds Ranch as home. The thought no longer filled her with guilt or confusion. Instead, it brought a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place that she hadn't known were missing. On a particularly beautiful July evening, Isaac found Willow on the porch, Thomas asleep in her arms as she watched the sunset paint the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. "He's growing so fast," Isaac observed, smiling down at the sleeping baby. "Seems like just yesterday he was making his dramatic entrance into the world." "I know." Willow's voice held wonder mixed with a touch of wistfulness. "Soon he'll be walking and talking. I can hardly believe it. You're a wonderful mother, Willow." Isaac's tone was warm with admiration. "The way you care for him, the love you show him, it's beautiful to watch." Willow looked up at him, touched by the sincerity in his words. "Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the last rays of sunlight gilded the distant mountains. "I've been thinking," Isaac said eventually, his voice thoughtful, "about the future, about what I want." Willow's heart quickened. "And what is that?" "This." Isaac gestured to the three of them himself, Willow and the sleeping Thomas. A family. A real home. He turned to face her fully. I know it's only been a short time and I promise not to rush you, but I need you to know where I stand. Willow gazed up at him, seeing the earnestness in his expression, the depth of feeling in his eyes. Where do you stand, Isaac? I love you, Willow Morgan. The words were simple, direct, honest. I love your strength, your kindness, your gentle heart. I love watching you with Thomas, hearing you play the piano, seeing your smile first thing in the morning. He took a deep breath. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me, not right away, only when you're ready, but I needed you to know. Tears sprang to Willow's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. Over the past month, she had come to terms with her feelings, the lingering love for her late husband coexisting peacefully with her growing love for Isaac. There was room in her heart for both, she had realized. Thomas would always be her first love, the father of her child, a cherished memory. But Isaac was her future, unexpected and all the more precious for it. I love you too, she whispered, the words releasing something tight and painful that had been lodged in her chest since her husband's death. I wasn't looking for love. I wasn't ready for it, but it found me anyway on a dusty trail when I thought all was lost. Isaac's face transformed with joy, years seeming to fall away as he smiled. Willow. He reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch reverent. I'm not ready for marriage, she continued honestly. Not yet, I need more time. Time is something we have plenty of, Isaac assured her. I'm not going anywhere and neither are you if you don't want to. I don't want to, Willow confirmed, shifting Thomas in her arms. This is home now, for both of us. Isaac leaned forward, his intent clear. Willow met him halfway, their first kiss soft and sweet and full of promise. Thomas stirred between them but didn't wake, as if sensing that a new family was forming around him, built on love that had found its way through grief and chance and kindness. Over the following months, Willow and Isaac grew closer, their love deepening as they navigated the everyday challenges of ranch life and raising a growing baby. Thomas's first smile, first laugh, and first attempts to roll over were celebrated by the entire ranch, with Mrs. Abernathy declaring him the smartest baby in the Dakota Territory, and Jim's children competing for his attention. Willow found purpose beyond motherhood, using her teaching skills to establish a small school for the children of ranch hands and nearby homesteaders. 3 days a week, the ranch house's dining room transformed into a classroom, with children of various ages gathered around the large table, eager for knowledge. Isaac built proper desks that winter, setting them up in a converted storage building that became a proper schoolhouse by spring. In November, on a crisp, clear day with the first dusting of snow on the distant mountains, Isaac and Willow were married in a simple ceremony on the ranch. Thomas, now 5 months old and sitting up on his own, watched from Mrs. Abernathy's lap as his mother promised to love his new father for all her days. Martha and Edward Wilson stood as witnesses, their initial reservations long since replaced by genuine happiness for the couple. I never expected to find love again, Willow said that night as they sat before the fire in what was now their shared bedroom. Thomas slept peacefully in his crib nearby, exhausted from the excitement of the day. Nor I to find it for the first time, Isaac replied, his arm around her shoulders. But I'm grateful every day for whatever twist of fate led me to that spot on the trail. Willow leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing through her. It's strange to think how close we came to never meeting. If I had left Minnesota a day earlier or later, if you hadn't decided to check that section of fence that morning, then I'd still be a lonely rancher and you'd be teaching in Sioux Falls. Isaac pressed a kiss to her temple. "And neither of us would know what we were missing." "I'm glad we found each other," Willow whispered. "All three of us." As winter settled over the Dakota Territory, the Reynolds house was warm with love and laughter. The following spring brought new calves to the herd, new flowers to the prairie, and news that the family would grow again by winter a brother or sister for Thomas, conceived in love and welcomed with joy. 5 years later, the Reynolds ranch had grown substantially, as had the family that called it home. Thomas, now a sturdy 5-year-old with his mother's eyes and his namesake's dark hair, was the adored big brother to 3-year-old Emma and 1-year-old William. Willow's small school had expanded to include 20 students, with a proper schoolhouse built on the ranch property and a second teacher hired from Sioux Falls. On the anniversary of the day they met, Isaac and Willow rode out to the line shack where Thomas had been born. The small cabin had been maintained and improved over the years, serving as a reminder of their extraordinary beginning. "It looks so different now," Willow observed as they dismounted. "But I can still see it as it was that night, just you and me and a new little life entering the world." Isaac took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Best night of my life, though I was terrified the whole time." Willow laughed. "So was I. But you were so calm, so steady. You gave me strength when I needed it most." "That's what love does," Isaac replied simply. "It makes us stronger than we ever thought we could be." They walked to the rise where they had first acknowledged their feelings for each other, looking out over the land that had nurtured their growing family, and the home they had built together, not just the physical structure, but the bond between them that had turned strangers into soulmates. "I sometimes think about that woman who collapsed on the trail," Willow mused, leaning against her husband's side. "How desperate and alone she felt. If I could go back and tell her what was waiting for her, what would you say?" Isaac asked, wrapping an arm around her waist. Willow considered for a moment. "That sometimes the end of one journey is just the beginning of a better one. That kindness can change lives. That love finds us when we least expect it. And that a cowboy who gives up his horse might just be giving his heart along with it." Isaac suggested with a smile. "Especially that," Willow agreed, turning in his arms to face him. "Thank you for walking beside me, Isaac, every step of the way." Isaac kissed her as tenderly as he had that first time on the porch. "Always, my love, always." As they rode back to the ranch where their children waited, Willow reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought her to this moment of complete happiness. The grief and loss that had seemed insurmountable had not disappeared. She still kept Thomas Morgan's memory alive for their son, still visited his grave when they traveled east. But that grief had been transformed, becoming part of a larger tapestry that included joy, love, and the family she and Isaac had created together. The pregnant woman who had collapsed on the trail, desperate and alone, could never have imagined the life awaiting her. But the cowboy who had given her his horse and walked beside her had seen possibilities when all seemed lost. In that simple act of kindness, a future had been born not just for Thomas, taking his first breath in a line shack on the prairie, but for all of them, finding in each other the home they had always sought.